They never told you this because it sounds dangerous, almost forbidden, and because once you understand it, you will never look at your own fatigue the same way again. There is a breathing ratio, so simple that it feels insulting, a pattern so subtle that modern science overlooked it for decades, yet so powerful that ancient practitioners treated it with fear and reverence, passing it only in whispers. I am talking about a specific way of breathing that speaks directly to your mitochondria, the microscopic engines inside your cells, and forces them to wake up. You were taught that energy comes from food, from calories, from supplements, from caffeine. But that is a half-truth, and half-truths are the most dangerous kind because they keep you trapped while making you feel informed. The real gatekeeper of your energy is not what you eat, it is how efficiently your cells use oxygen, and that efficiency is controlled by breath. Not by deep breathing, not by slow breathing, but by a precise ratio that changes the internal chemistry of your body in seconds. The 1:4:2 ratio sounds harmless, almost boring, yet it alters carbon dioxide tolerance, nervous system signaling, and mitochondrial respiration in a way that feels almost illegal once you experience it. You have been breathing your entire life, but you have never been taught how to breathe to generate power at the cellular level. And that omission is not accidental. When breathing is reduced to relaxation, you are manageable. When breathing becomes a tool for energy amplification, you become unpredictable. I say this as someone who has studied both the lab data and the forgotten practices side by side, and what I found disturbed me enough that I stopped sharing it casually. Because once you feel your cells respond, once you sense that internal surge that is not adrenaline and not caffeine, you realize how artificially constrained your baseline has been. This is not about calming down. This is about doubling the output of the machinery that keeps you alive. And before you dismiss this as exaggeration, understand this. Mitochondria respond to gas ratios, not beliefs, and the breath is the fastest way to change those ratios without drugs or devices. What you are about to learn sits at the intersection of modern bioenergetics and knowledge that was deliberately left unspoken, because a population that can generate its own energy on demand is harder to control. You may feel a slight resistance even reading this, a voice saying this sounds risky or strange, and that reaction is exactly the conditioning I am talking about. This is the doorway, and once you step through it, there is no going back to breathing unconsciously ever again. Look at your own life honestly, and you will see the problem everywhere, hiding in plain sight. You wake up already tired, not exhausted enough to panic, but drained enough to accept it as normal. Your mind works, but it feels like it is moving through fog. Your body functions, but it lacks that sharp readiness you vaguely remember from earlier years or rare perfect days. You blame age, stress, workload, bad sleep, bad genes, bad luck, and you keep searching for external fixes because that is what you were trained to do. More coffee, more stimulants, more motivation, more discipline. Yet none of it touches the real bottleneck. The uncomfortable truth is this: most people are not low on energy because they lack fuel. They are low on energy because their cells cannot efficiently convert oxygen into usable power. You are eating enough. You are breathing enough air. But enough is not optimal, and mitochondria do not care about effort, only conditions. When oxygen enters your body under the wrong internal chemistry, it becomes inefficient, almost wasted, like pouring premium fuel into a clogged engine. This is why rest does not fully restore you, why weekends do not reset you, why even healthy people feel subtly depleted. Your nervous system is stuck in a low-grade alert state. Your carbon dioxide tolerance is poor. and your mitochondria are operating far below their design capacity. This creates a silent energy tax you pay every second, one you never agreed to. The danger is not dramatic burnout. It is slow normalization of weakness. When low energy becomes your baseline, you stop questioning it. And that is when control is complete. You start believing that feeling sharp, warm, and internally charged is rare or unrealistic. It is not. It is simply inaccessible under your current breathing patterns. This is why exercise feels harder than it should, why recovery takes longer, why mental focus slips under pressure. Your cells are rationing power, not because they must, but because the signals they receive from your breath tell them to stay conservative, to stay small, to stay safe. And here is the part that should bother you. No supplement, no diet, no mindset technique can override this signal if your breathing chemistry is wrong. You cannot think your way out of a cellular inefficiency problem. Until you change the way oxygen and carbon dioxide interact inside your body, you are negotiating with limits that do not need to exist. This is the stake. Continue breathing the way you were taught, and you remain capped, functional but restrained. Change it deliberately, and you confront how much energy was always available, but never unlocked. Now we move from accusation to explanation, because once you see the mechanism, the mystery collapses into something disturbingly logical. Inside almost every cell you have, there are mitochondria, and their only real job is to turn oxygen into ATP, the molecular currency of energy. But what most people never learn is that mitochondria do not respond to oxygen alone, they respond to ratios. Oxygen without sufficient carbon dioxide is not power, it is noise. Carbon dioxide is not a waste gas, as you were taught. It is a master regulator that controls oxygen release from hemoglobin, mitochondrial membrane potential, and the electrical gradient that drives ATP synthesis. When you breathe too fast, too shallow, or too rhythmically uniform, you blow off carbon dioxide and create a silent internal hypoxia, meaning oxygen is present in the blood but cannot be properly released into the tissues. Your mitochondria sense this and downshift, like an engine detecting unstable combustion. The 1:4:2 ratio exploits this exact vulnerability. A short inhale introduces oxygen without panic. The long controlled hold raises carbon dioxide just enough to signal safety and efficiency. And the measured exhale stabilizes the nervous system while preserving that CO2 gain. This sequence shifts your autonomic balance toward parasympathetic dominance while simultaneously increasing mitochondrial efficiency, a combination most people assume is impossible. Think of your mitochondria like thousands of tiny furnaces. Oxygen is the flame, but carbon dioxide is the damper that controls how cleanly and powerfully that flame burns. Without the damper, the fire sputters and wastes fuel. The breath hold is not about willpower or deprivation. It is about briefly altering blood gas chemistry so that oxygen finally detaches from hemoglobin and enters the cells where it belongs. At the same time, this ratio stimulates the vagus nerve, slowing heart rate variability just enough to reduce metabolic chaos, while increasing nitric oxide signaling, which further improves oxygen delivery at the microvascular level. This is why the effect feels warm, spreading, and quietly intense rather than jittery or forced. You are not adding energy from outside. You are removing inefficiency from within. Modern studies observe fragments of this truth in isolation. CO2 tolerance here, breath hold benefits there, vagal tone somewhere else, but they rarely connect the system as a whole. Ancient practitioners did not need the vocabulary. They only needed the feedback of their own bodies. The 1:4:2 ratio is not magic, it is leverage. It presses on a narrow biological switch that controls how generously your mitochondria are allowed to produce power. And once that switch flips, the increase in energy feels disproportionate to the simplicity of the action. That is why it was never emphasized in mainstream breathing advice. Simple mechanisms that create large effects are always the most threatening. What unsettles most people is not the science itself, but the realization that this knowledge was never truly lost, only fragmented and disguised. Long before mitochondria were named, before oxygen was measured, before ATP was drawn on whiteboards, certain groups discovered through necessity that breath could be engineered to sustain power far beyond normal limits. Ascetics meditating for hours in cold stone halls, monks chanting through the night without fatigue, warriors standing in silent readiness before combat. All of them relied on breath patterns that quietly manipulated internal chemistry. They did not speak of carbon dioxide or vagal tone, but they spoke of internal fire, pressure in the lower abdomen, and a feeling of contained force that could be summoned at will. When you strip away the symbolism, what remains is control over gas ratios and nervous system timing. Modern laboratories now confirm that slow, controlled breath holds raised CO2 tolerance and improves cellular oxygen utilization. Yet these findings are presented as isolated curiosities, never as a unified protocol. That separation is convenient. When knowledge remains scattered, it feels harmless. When it is connected, it becomes actionable, and action is what has always been restricted. The 1:4:2 ratio appears again and again when ancient practices are translated into measurable timing, not always written as numbers, but encoded in cadence, count, and rhythm. The inhale is brief, almost incidental. The stillness after the inhale is where the work happens. The exhale seals the effect, calming the surface while the depth changes. This mirrors what we now observe in mitochondrial signaling, where brief stress followed by controlled recovery triggers efficiency and adaptation. You are not borrowing something mystical. You are inheriting a practical solution that was preserved precisely because it worked when nothing else did. What changed is not human biology, but the stories we tell about it. By labeling ancient breath control as spiritual or symbolic, it was safely removed from the realm of power and placed into the realm of culture. Science, meanwhile, dissected the body into parts and forgot to teach people how to use the system as a whole. This is the bridge. On one side, lab data about oxygen, CO2, and cellular respiration. On the other, centuries of lived experimentation under extreme conditions. The 1:4:2 mitochondrial breath sits exactly in the middle, not as a belief, but as a repeatable biological trigger. When you practice it, you are not imitating the past. You are proving that the past was observing the same mechanisms we are only now confident enough to name. This is where theory becomes irreversible experience, and details matter more than enthusiasm. The mitochondrial breath is simple, but it is not casual, and the difference between mild relaxation and a true cellular response lives in precision. You begin seated or standing with your spine upright, not rigid, because collapsed posture compresses the diaphragm and sabotages gas exchange before you even start. Your mouth stays closed, tongue resting lightly on the roof, because nasal breathing preserves nitric oxide and stabilizes pressure. The inhale is short and controlled through the nose, roughly 1 count, not a gasp and not a deep pull, just enough air to feel the lungs open without urgency. Immediately after, you hold for 4 counts, but this is not a clenched hold. Your throat stays soft, jaw relaxed, shoulders heavy. The sensation you are looking for is pressure without strain, a subtle fullness in the chest and abdomen as carbon dioxide rises and the body recalibrates. If your mind panics here, you are holding too aggressively. The exhale then lasts 2 counts through the nose or lightly parted lips, smooth and unforced, as if you are releasing steam rather than air. This completes one cycle. You repeat this for 5 to 10 minutes, no more at first, because mitochondria respond quickly and excess is unnecessary. The most common mistake is over-inhaling. More air feels intuitive, but it destroys the ratio and dumps carbon dioxide too fast. Another mistake is tightening during the hold, turning a chemical signal into a stress response. The power of this protocol lies in calm pressure, not struggle. Your attention should rest on internal sensations rather than counting mechanically, noticing warmth, subtle vibration, or a spreading sense of density in the torso. These are not imaginary. They are the subjective markers of improved oxygen release and mitochondrial activation. If dizziness appears, you stop immediately, because that means you broke the ratio or forced the breath. This is not a test of toughness. It is an instruction to your cells. Practiced correctly, the protocol feels almost anticlimactic at first, and that is how you know it is working. No drama, no hyperventilation, just a quiet internal shift, like machinery switching into a higher gear without making noise. This is the exact moment most people underestimate what they are doing. And that underestimation is why the protocol remains so effective. The transformation does not arrive as a single dramatic event, and that is what makes it believable. Within the first few minutes of your initial session, most people notice warmth in the hands, face, or core, a sign that peripheral blood flow is improving, as oxygen is finally being released where it is needed. The mind often becomes quieter, but sharper at the same time. Not sedated, just less scattered, because the nervous system is no longer fighting inefficient chemistry. After the first day or two, you may notice that physical tasks feel slightly easier, that stairs demand less effort, that your breath during movement becomes naturally slower, without conscious control. This is mitochondrial efficiency beginning to express itself systemically. After 1 week of daily practice, 5 to 10 minutes at a time, many people report faster recovery from exertion, more stable energy across the day, and a reduction in the compulsive need for stimulants. This is not because you have less to do, but because your cells are producing ATP more cleanly, with less waste and less stress signaling. By the second or third week, the changes become harder to ignore. Sleep quality often improves even without changing duration, because the nervous system spends less time in a defensive state. Mental endurance increases. Focus under pressure becomes more accessible. These are not psychological tricks. They are the downstream effects of improved oxygen utilization and carbon dioxide tolerance at the cellular level. Over longer periods, practitioners often notice that their baseline breathing pattern changes on its own, becoming quieter, slower, and more economical. This is crucial because it means the protocol is teaching your body, not just temporarily stimulating it. The danger here is subtle complacency. When the improvement feels natural, you may forget how constrained you were before. That is why the timeline matters. These changes are not imagined spikes of motivation. They are measurable shifts in how efficiently your biology converts air into life. If you stop the practice, the effects fade. If you continue, they compound. This is not a one-time trick. It is a recalibration. And like all recalibrations, it reveals how misaligned the system was to begin with. Now comes the moment most people avoid, because knowledge without action is comfortable, and action changes identity. You can close this script and return to breathing the way you always have. Slightly tired, slightly dulled. Telling yourself this was interesting, but impractical, and nothing dramatic will happen. That is precisely the danger. The real risk is not trying this protocol. It is continuing to live inside an artificially low ceiling and calling it normal. You now understand that your energy is not fixed, that your cells are listening to your breath every second, deciding whether to operate defensively or generously. Ignoring that truth does not make it disappear. It only guarantees that the decision will continue to be made unconsciously. I am challenging you to test this, not believe it. Commit to the 1-4-2 mitochondrial breath, once a day for 14 days, no more than 10 minutes. Done with precision and restraint. Do not stack it with stimulants. Do not dramatize it. Do not talk yourself out of it when it feels subtle. Observe your energy, your recovery, your mental clarity, and your baseline mood, like a scientist watching an experiment that involves your own nervous system. If nothing changes, you lose nothing. But if it works, and it will, you gain something most people never reclaim: direct influence over how alive you feel. This is why this knowledge feels unsettling. It removes excuses. It removes dependence. It puts responsibility back where it belongs, in the simplest action you perform thousands of times a day. Breathing is no longer neutral once you see this. Every breath becomes a choice between inefficiency and power. You were never meant to feel perpetually drained, foggy, or brittle. That state was trained, normalized, and defended. This protocol is your refusal. Start today, not tomorrow, because momentum favors the body that is already producing energy efficiently. Once you feel the difference, the real challenge will not be maintaining the practice. It will be accepting that this level of energy was always available, waiting for you to breathe differently.